look this morning, open if you would to Psalm 103, the 103rd Psalm on your handout. If you haven't got a handout, if you raise your hand, Mark will go get you one. At the bottom of your handout is the way that I've broken up the 103rd Psalm, especially for the discussion this morning, to look at it topically. So the first 5 verses, or verses 1 through 5, about the blessing of God of salvation. And verses 6 through 14, about God knowing that life is hard. We'll slightly change the understanding of that topic that I've given on that at the end of the sermon. Verses 15 through 18 about the nature of man and the nature of God, and then verses 19 through 22 about the sovereignty of God as we look at God's power today. So the 103rd Psalm. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. He knows the ways of. He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the people of Israel. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his steadfast love towards those who fear him. As far as the east from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. As a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. For he knows our frame, and he remembers that we are dust. As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like the flower of the field, for the wind passes over it and is gone, and its place knows it no more. But the steadfast love of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him, and his righteousness to children's children. To those who keep his covenant and remember to do his commandments, the Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. Bless the Lord, O you his angels, you mighty ones who do his word, obeying the voice of his word. Bless the Lord, all his hosts, his ministers who do his will. Bless the Lord, all his works, in all places of his dominion. Bless the Lord, O my soul. First place that we'll look in that psalm is the 19th verse. Again, as I've kind of said, the 19 through 22 discusses points about his sovereignty. In the 19th verse, we read, the Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. Let's start here in the discussion of the power of God. The very first verse, the very first book, the very first thing recorded that's written down by Moses, so that we could start to understand who our God is. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We read it quickly. We use it often as a memory verse. It's something that children are taught. This is, I was going to read the Bible one day and skip to the second verse because I knew that this was the first verse. So I just went ahead and found where the little marker said 2 so that I could start with the second verse. The trick was on me. It was a Gideon Bible. So we started at Matthew 1:2, and that was just a fiasco in itself. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Do not let this power get lost on you. Do not read over this so quickly that you forget what was just said or that you don't give it any emphasis. God created the heavens and the earth. But it doesn't stop there. And why did I just pick 5 verses? Because not only did God create heavens and the earth, he has all authority over the heavens and the earth. And while he's just chilling out with his creation, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. What else? What else? What would you want to do? What could you tell him to do? Use that because it's so unfathomable to think, what is God doing with his creation? So far in the entire universe, what we know of, what is written down, is that God created the heavens and the earth, and now he's just here looking at it. And he has this kind of power and authority, a place that for thousands and thousands of years, and even to today, being out on the ocean is a dangerous and precarious thing. Even with the modern cities that float and launch aircraft off of them from the middle of the ocean, they're still at the whim of the ocean, and they go around hurricanes if at all possible. God's just hanging out. He's just there. He just has that ability. He just has that power. Let there be light, and there was light. Try that when the hurricane shows up. God saw that the light was good. He separated light and darkness. We can't, all of these things individually taken, we take them for granted, and yet God has created the ability for this thing to be different than that. There was evening and morning, and there was the first day. And so he creates time as well. Every dimension that we know of or that we can think of, and God has created all. And we read over it so quickly, and we just move past it, that it can be lost on us. Don't let the power of God be an afterthought for you. In chapter 6, God decides that even though this is something that he's created, it's time that he would destroy it. And so he does destroy it. In chapter 8, verse 21, the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again strike down every living creature as I have done. God destroys the earth. He floods it with water. And the words of his own mouth are that he has struck down every living creature. You can't beat this God. He's that God. He's that big. Not only that, but in the very next verse, while the earth remains seed time and harvest, heat, cold and heat, summer and winter, night, day and night shall not cease. He's going to set seasons up. Not only can we not control seasons, we look at groundhogs to figure out what they're going to be. We have no idea how to deal with this. The Farmer's Almanac is probably the closest that you're going to get to even being able to predict what the season is going to be. And that doesn't control the season. It just gets close to telling you when the times of them might happen. So we finally get to a place where we start to understand the power that he has, and as he decides, or as he desires to have a relationship with his people, he descends on a mountain to show them who he is. Not only is his power stronger than anything they can comprehend, but just his appearance frightens them. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. So if you try to show what things are in the Bible, and you try to explain things, then this sounds like a volcano, right? It does. Like if you look at Kilauea or some of the other mountains that you can see, I think Kilauea is the one that's been erupting recently in Hawaii. This kind of sounds like that. And we can get an idea or a glimpse of what that's like. And what I would encourage you to do is don't do that here. Take your idea of a volcano and understand that and apply that to Kilauea, to stay away from it. But Mount Sinai is not a volcano. This is the trembling, all terrifying presence of God that is going to come down, and the people are going to say, this is too great for us. Don't let us talk to him. Keep us away from him. This is not a volcano. This is so much greater than that. Verse 20 in the 103rd Psalm. Bless the Lord, O you his angels, the mighty ones who do his word, obeying the voice of his word. If you read that from the King James Version, it's probably one of the better readings. It's more easy to understand. Very rarely is that the case. But here it certainly is. Bless the Lord, ye his angels that excel in strength, that do his commandments, hearkening unto the voice of his word. The angels that excel in strength, he has power over. Let's look at one angel. In 1 Chronicles chapter 21, David has done something dumb, as David tends to do. And now there is a price to be paid. So David selects the price to be paid, and he's watching the price unfold. One angel. So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell. And God sent the angel to Jerusalem to destroy it. But as he was about to destroy it, the Lord saw, and he relented from the calamity. And he said to the angel who was working destruction, "It is enough. Now stay your hand." And the angel of the Lord was standing by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. The one angel who is working destruction, one angel, starts with an opening volley that kills 70,000 men. That's 230% of the population of this county. 230% of the population of this county. So what's that? This county, Taylor County, Franklin County, and maybe some of Jefferson County as well. Maybe those 4 counties. That one angel, with his opening overture, starts out with, let me just kill 70,000. Now, I'm going to get to work. And God stays his hand, says, wait, hold on. One angel. The 21st verse, bless the Lord, all his hosts, his ministers who do his will. Now this word hosts means armies. It's the groupings of the angels. This was the armies of the Lord. So let's look at this thought for a minute. So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning, he went out, and behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, alas, my master, what shall we do? And he said, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with him. I cut that off short. Let's turn there. 2 Kings chapter 6. So while you're going there, I'll set this point up. Elisha is in a city. He has a servant. The army comes and besieges the city. And they set the army all around the city. This is a pretty big army, right? It's an army that's large enough to surround a city. I don't know how large the city is. Maybe it's a couple square miles. There's enough people to completely surround the city. That's a big army all on its own. In verse 17, then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So if you have an army that's large enough to surround a city, you're doing pretty good as a leader, as a military leader. You've got a lot of folks. If you've got an army that can fill the mountains that surround the city, you're bigger than the other guy. It's not just that there were a large number of angels or there was a large army of heaven that was able to set against the Syrians. They filled the mountains that surrounded the valley that the city sat in. If you want to dispute the numbers, we're both going to have a difficult time. But if you just drew a circle in the mountains around the city and there was one angel every 5 feet, you've still got a huge population of this army. And this is the God. This is the power of this God. Because remember, the opening salvo, the opening volley of one of these angels has the ability to strike down 70,000. Verse 22, Psalm 103, verse 22. Bless the Lord, all his works in all the places of his dominion. What is his dominion? God has created all. Of Christ he speaks in Colossians chapter 1. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. Not only did he create them, he has full authority over everything. He can do with anything what he desires to do. When his people were inhabiting a land, he sent hornets in front of them to drive people out. And I've made this point in the past, but just think about it. What is fighting for you is a wasp or a hornet or pick whichever one you think is meaner. They all sting and that's horrible, and you can't even hit them with a baseball bat. Hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites. If he doesn't want to use a little creature, he can use a little rock of ice. And the Lord threw them into a panic before Israel, who struck them with a great blow at Gibeon and chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth Horon, and struck them as far as Azekah and Mekkedah. And as they fled before Israel, while they were going down the ascent of Beth Horon, the Lord threw down large stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more who died because of the hailstones than the sons of Israel killed with the sword. He can use hornets. He can use hail. And if that is not what he wants to do, he can hold the world still so that his people can keep fighting. It's not that he created the earth. It's not that he created light. It's not that he created time, and it's not that he controls seasons. It's not just that he controls all the little bugs, and it's not just that he controls all of the water. He can just make it all stop. It's not just that he's created all these things. He can do whatever he wants. He can manipulate it in any way that he so desires. What a powerful God. It's not just that he does this with things. He allows people to do this as well. In one of the really cool stories of the Bible, in 2 Kings, the first chapter, you have Ahab sending people after Elijah. And I don't know what Elijah's doing. He seems to be relaxing. I don't know if he's got his favorite comic book and he's sitting on a stone, or if he's learning to play the lyre, or if he's just on the rock praying, which works. But the arrogance that Elijah seems to speak with is comical. The whole scene is comical except for 100 folks. And the king sent to him a captain of 50 men with his 50. And he went up to Elijah, who was sitting on top of a hill, and he said to him, "O man of God, the king says, come down." But Elijah answered the captain of the 50, "If I'm a man of God, let fire come down out of heaven and consume you and your 50. And they're gone. Elijah's pretty good at calling down fire out of heaven, speaking with God about doing things. So a man of God, he allows to call fire. With Samson, he allows Samson to call for strength. So the dead that he killed in his death were more than whom he had killed during his life to preserve Israel. In 2 Chronicles chapter 1, starting in verse 10, we read of the exchange between Solomon and God, where God is going to gift something to Solomon, and Solomon selects wisdom. So not always an element of destruction, but here Solomon asks for wisdom for the preservation, for the growth, for the prosperity of God's people. So a hero of God calls for wisdom, and God blesses him. Well, how do you judge that? In the New International Version, 1 Kings 10:21 reads, "All of King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days." The prosperity that's given to the one who calls for wisdom, who is trying to help God's people, is heaped upon him to such a great extent that the second most precious metal in all of the earth is considered invaluable or lacking value because of its commonness. And a man of God, a hero of God, can call for life and receive it as well. Because God is not only powerful enough to create the earth, to set nature and physics and sciences in their proper order, He's not just powerful enough to create and command all of the little bugs and all of the creatures that we can and cannot see, even hailstones and water. He's not only powerful enough to allow or to imbue people with authority to act on his behalf in his name, but he's powerful enough to die for us as well. The Gospel of John starts with discussing how Jesus is God. And we often read, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But if you'll continue that down to the 5th verse, it also discusses Jesus as being the light. And in verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The New Living Translation renders this with the proper tense of the Greek. Now, I'm not going to teach you Greek because I don't know it very well either. But in Greek, you can have a word that means something that happened already or something that's going to happen in the future. And you also have this ability for a word to mean something that is happening and will continue to happen. And this is the way that this word should read in verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. The darkness has not overcome it. The darkness is not overcoming it. And the darkness will never overcome it. And this is the Jesus that comes. This is the God that comes to live. He has the power to put on humanity. The created has the ability, the creator has the ability to become the created. the creator has the ability to become the created. That in itself is incredible. It's just, how does that even work? If you were to make a box, could you make yourself a box? And I understand that you can't create a box. You can't even create a ball or make yourself into a ball. Not a round one. Yet God is able to do that. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen His glory. Glory is of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. He creates Himself into man's image. He empties Himself of divinity, taking on the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, humbles Himself even to a death on the cross, and He does it voluntarily. Jesus, as man, volunteers Himself to die. In John chapter 10, verse 18, I have the authority to lay it down, speaking of His own life, and I have the authority to take it up again. Having the authority to lay down your own life is one thing. Like, you can volunteer to go get put in harm's way. But even here now, it's difficult to say, I will volunteer to die. Will you kill me? That's the one side of it. The other side of it is, since He has the authority to lay it down, it cannot be taken away from Him. You cannot prevent your own death if it's going to happen. Everything about this verse is showing a level of authority or showing a level of power that is beyond our ability. How often do preachers end their sermons with, and you don't know if you're going to get in a car and get in a car accident on the way home, so you better keep your life right with God, or fill in the circumstance that they would use. And here Jesus is saying, no, this is going to happen the way I want it to happen. This is going to go the way I want it to go. Not only does He have the power to lay down His life, not only does He have the power over His life that it will only be taken from Him as He gives it, but He also has the power to raise from the dead. In Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 18, He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything He might be preeminent. For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross, as we sang about earlier. Not only does He have the power to raise Himself from the dead, but He has the ability to raise us from the dead as well. Continuing in the second chapter of Colossians, in the 12th verse, discussing us, having been buried with Him in baptism, in which you were also raised with Him through faith in the powerful working of God, who raised Him from the dead. And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with Him, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This He set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in Him. So here's a turn of events. Not only does He have the ability or the power to raise us, but there's a discussion in verse 13 of a separation between us and Him, a thing that would put us at odds with Him. And we don't want to be at odds with God if God is all powerful. And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with Him, having forgiven us all of our trespasses, canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This would be a thing that would stand against us, that would put separation between us and God, and we'll look at that at the end. And we don't want to have anything stand between us and something that is all-powerful. The point of Psalm 103 is God blessing a God who is powerful enough to save. That's how the song opens. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity and heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Of all of the things that God can do, create, destroy, empower, show power, even die for us and be raised again, what he chooses to do is to die for us and be raised again so that we could be raised again to be like him or to be with him. It's how the song opens. It's how the song closes. What happens in the meantime? That's 6 through 14. God knows what we are. And he closes that whole section with all of the problems that we have, with all of the things that he can do for us. He closes that whole section by letting us know that he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. He understands the weaknesses that we have. How wonderful a thing that something that is almighty will know our weaknesses. You can take that a step further if you like and discuss how Paul says that he's made more perfect in his weakness. Isaiah chapter 40, which we'll probably look at a little bit next week, at the end of that discusses strength and weakness of God, or the strength of God and the weakness of man. Because he knows of our weakness, he desires to save. The steadfast love of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him and keep his righteous, and to children's children, to those who keep his covenant and remember to do his commands. The scripture from Isaiah is at chapter 59, not chapter 29. Isaiah 59, 1 and 2. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, or his ear dull that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God, for your sins have hidden his face from you so that he does not hear. God has the ability to save. He has the power to save. He has the desire to save. And what he's telling you is that sin will be the thing that keeps a separation between you and him. Will you allow your sin to keep separation between you and him? Because that's the one thing that he will allow to stand between you. He's even gone so far as to die to make a way available to us to save us. If he doesn't save a soul in the end, it's not because he doesn't have the power. It's because they choose to stand against him as an enemy. That 59th chapter of Isaiah starts with, the Lord's hand is not shortened that he cannot save. His arm is not shortened. His strength is not decreased that he doesn't have the ability to save. It's that you've allowed your sin to be a separation between you and him. God has the ability to save no matter what your problem is or how bad your sin is. He has the ability to save it. So we're going to sing number 648, Stand Up for Jesus. We're going to sing the first and third verse. And that third verse specifically speaks to which arm you desire to look for strength in. You can look at the power and the strength of his arm and its ability to save, or you can trust your own. But you're going to have to make a decision on that.